Welcome back to Sacred Success Salon, where we are speaking to amazing experts about how to lead and thrive right now as an awakened leader. I am your host, Anna Kowalska, and today you guys are in for a treat. Brenda Adelman is here with us. Hello, Brenda.
Hi, how are you?
So great to have you. So you guys, we already warmed up. We already had like a 20-minute conversation.
Yes,
So
we did.
So we're just going to pull you into it. But before we do, let me just say a few words about Brenda. So in case you haven't met her in the salon about 2 years ago, she's a returning guest. Let me introduce you to our guest today. Brenda Adelman is an award-winning actor. She's a recipient of the Hero of Forgiveness Award, which I think is so beautiful. She has been interviewed on CBS, NPR, Fox TV News, and over 200 podcasts. She teaches purpose-driven solopreneurs and thought leaders how to create an impact and income with their own successful TED-style talks and their videos throughout unforgettable storytelling. And right before you and I were having conversation, you were sharing with me about this shift in that's occurring in your business, right? So there was a phase of your life in your business where you were focusing on your story, and now something new is emerging. So let's start there.
Yes, it's so exciting for me to be really, really excited about, really pulled forward with this other part of my purpose. So for the past over 15 years, I have been sharing my own personal story on stages across the world, 4 countries, 10 states, and virtually. Since the lockdown, I had 3 theaters, 1 in Los Angeles and 2 in San Diego, produced my show in a 3-camera shoot. And also over the last couple of years, I have been providing a virtual space, first an in-person space, and then a virtual space teaching entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, healers, anyone who has a really big story, how to, I provided a space for them to create like a TED style talk. I directed it, but it was a healing through story class, 6-week, 8-week programs. And I did that because I wanted them to not only write their story, because people can get caught in writing forever, or they can get caught in being in a class and kind of reading material with each other, but not really affecting the world. And so I created a space in person and then virtually for them to do their piece directed by me in front of an invited audience, so that they can have the impact I have when I do my show all over the world. And witnessing them affect people with their honesty, their authenticity, their fierceness, their fun, their uniqueness has really now led me to want to have something much bigger and broader for my mission. So I've done these 8-week and 6-week classes, and I have digital training, but then in between there'd be nothing. So all this connection between everybody from this authentic place would be stopped. So I am creating this Soul Story Lounge, which is teaching my soul story method of speaking, healing yourself and healing others, and presenting fiercely. But it's also behind the scenes, because I know, as someone who has shared a very big story, my father killed my mother and then married her sister. And my story is about my message, which is about forgiveness. But I know that if you share these big stories before you're ready, you will run away, you'll be depressed. So the Soul Story Lounge is about giving the tools and techniques to really put your story out there, but then it's a place to learn how to nurture yourself, how to not be depleted when you're giving so much out there,
This is so great. Oh, I love it, because I wasn't even thinking this is where we're going to go. And I love where you just stopped, because it's such a great place, right? This is the place of vulnerability, right? And tell me if this is true, because I experienced this. I'll share something, even if it's a Facebook Live, or it doesn't, it's Instagram, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And there is this sense of, now I know it's vulnerability, but I literally feel like, take it off, take it out, like, let me disappear. I just want to, this comfort, right?
Exactly. I'm so glad. Oh, wow. This is like just giving, like, I'm getting chills, because it shows me how right on the money I am. I made every mistake, because I was a trained actress when I decided to put my story up in an acting class, not ever knowing it would be a successful one-person show. But because I didn't know the inner technique of, it was before I got a master's in spiritual psychology, where I learned how to nurture myself. people would laugh, people would cry, people would be activated, but I would be absolutely miserable. Yeah. And the other thing is, so I teach crafting your story at the same time as healing from your story. And there's such a buzz now, right? Tell your vulnerable story, tell your vulnerable story. But I can tell you, because I've worked with so many people, the things people have gone through just break my heart. And then my heart is broken open because I'm working with them. So I'm giving them the tools to help them through, rape, through so much betrayal, devastation that people have gone through. It's not just one person, it's like 1/3 of the people, I'd say, that I work with have gone through such devastating losses and abuse. So the thing is, it can be super healing, but like for someone like you, like if you're about to share something and you want to connect with people, the other thing is, this is an important point. So there is taking care of yourself. So nurturing yourself for being so brave. But there is also, oh, I just lost my train of thought. Wait. It'll come back to me. Come back to me.
So great. So the place we were talking about is nurturing yourself when you tell the story, knowing when to share it.
Knowing when to share it. Wait a second. I totally lost it. Oh my God. I totally lost it. And it's important. Perfect. I'm going to have to listen to this back and then share it with you.
It'll come back.
Oh, wait. It was about you sharing really vulnerably. And then, oh, here it is. If you don't heal to the level that you need to, you don't have to be completely healed, but if you don't heal to the level that you need to, meaning really have the witness there, you're saying something vulnerable, but you're potentially like splatting it out onto your audience. So it's not healing for them, or you're not sharing enough. Because you're not healed and people are actually worrying about you. So let me give a quick example.
So great.
After my father killed my mother and married my aunt, I didn't want to live. I really didn't. I just wanted to be with my mother. That was my mindset back then. So then it's a few years later, and I'm putting up my first production of my one-person show. My show is funny because I have a lot of humor in it. It's profound, it's edgy, and it's raw. And in the part where I share about wanting to kill myself, I also have this part of me that's like, oh, but everybody, it's okay. So I moved past the moment too soon. It's something beginners do, and it's when we're not fully healed. We're like, oh, we got to entertain the audience. So I'd go to the joke. And what I learned as an actor is that kept me stuck. And if it kept me stuck, it probably kept the audience stuck. And so as I continued to heal, I took my dad to court for wrongful death, stood in my power, not from anger, but from self-love. I looked at all of that. And then when I came back to the stage a couple of years later, and I shared that piece, I gave it the minute that it deserved. I let it land so that people could feel it. And then I moved into the joke, or I moved into it's okay though, because. So that's something with vulnerable stories that so a lot of these guru coaches don't teach, because they simply don't know how deep it goes for people. And my story is big like that. So I don't want people to compare themselves to me, because there are people who just had like a bad breakup that could be as devastated as I was, as the dramatic, with the dramatic thing I lived through. It's about being vulnerable in that moment. That humanness is what's important. The humanness that we're putting forth through our big stories or our small stories, but then making sure we have enough healing. You don't have to be completely healed, but that you do this work so that when you're healing, and you're sharing, you do it from a clear place.
It's so great. I'm
so glad I got that back.
Yeah, me too.
I went to bed very late. Yeah. Okay.
I don't think many of us are sleeping these days. I think the energy is just so powerful. I don't know.
It's true. I was working on the sales page so late. Okay.
Yeah, right. Things are coming in at weirdest times. So I love this, because you're absolutely right. There is this level of responsibility that we get to be in, and this is what I'm hearing, right? Yes, share your story. Yes, your story can be like, people have this whole mess to message, right? Your story, your business, the way that you help people absolutely could be based in whatever your breakdown was, whatever your challenge was. As you, right, exactly. As you were sharing, I had a vision of because I love that you say that not everybody has to have this gut-wrenching, terrible story. It could be the moment you got shut down that completely crumbled.
Yeah, and that
your
happens
inside.
for a lot of people. They have a parent that just was not kind to them. And that's enough to, when you learn how to articulate it in a professional way, to activate your audience. Like, we can heal people while we're healing ourselves and growing our business, because they remember you because you've moved them. In this day and age, it's so important to move people, to help them to feel something, and something that will move them forward with kindness to themselves, you know?
Oh, this is so great, because we are in a great transformation era, right? Like, we are in this like beautiful time, right? And the healing and the feeling is so important. So when we share a story, we get to be responsible for it actually creates something for the people watching, listening, right?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I've been doing these open mics for my for people I don't know, and then there's some of my clients that are in there, and it is the difference between someone will come in that hasn't been trained with me and all the years that I've done what I do, and it'll be a good story. It'll be, wow, that, let's say, for example, they had an illness and they then finally healed themselves. It led them to their purpose for their business. But then someone else who I have trained and who I direct will come in, and not only do you hear a good story, but you're riveted, and it reminds you of you as a listener, something in your house in that happened to you that might not be health, but where you had such a loss, you never thought you would get through it, and then you did. So it doesn't have to be the same story, but that's what I teach. How do you get from head to heart? And I think it's because of all the years I acted, and I would go on stage and I would learn what works, what doesn't. Like, I did it in front of reviewers and stuff like that, but I also learned like how to be consistent with it, and how the difference between, I used to get really good reviews when I first started on my story, but I wasn't getting it on my acting. And I was like, I don't want my big story to be overshadow me. And so I did everything I could to study with the top teachers, got to every open mic I could, put my story on stages, because I wanted the review on my acting. And then I did, and then I got it, and I won an award and stuff like that. And I wanted to be consistent with it. So it is really a two-pronged process. It's the story, but it's you as a person leaving your imprint on the world, leaving the imprints on the person who's listening to you, because you've shared so vulnerably, so powerfully, but you're one step ahead. So they don't have to worry about you. They can look at themselves.
Yeah. Oh, you know what I just saw for myself too? I love the way you just said that. They don't worry about you. They can look at themselves, right? Because in the whole conversation of people pleasing and trying to get it right and looking good, right? And taking care of other people's feelings. So I don't want to share too much. I've heard this so many times, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. People are like that all the time. I'm like, people can take care of themselves.
Right. Yeah. Like, I don't want to hurt people by sharing my story, right?
Can I share something on that?
Please.
And now, are you talking specifically around like, well, I don't want my family member to be upset with me? Is that
How about both? How about both?
What's both?
Asking. Both is like the audience, right? Just
Right.
people you're sharing, and two, the people you're sharing about.
That and they're going to be hurt by what you're sharing.
Yeah. So what was?
So why would the audience be hurt by what you're sharing?
If you don't, well, I don't know, right? But
like if you're putting too much emotion on them.
Right. It's like, the story is so terrible, right? This is what I hear.
Right.
The story is so terrible. I don't want people to be hurt by me sharing this story.
Right. And, that's why it's so important to learn what I teach, which is how do you own your emotions? So I have a very important exercise that is not for the audience on how to really exorcise those emotions, so that you're not, it's like writing several, emails before you send one out. You're dealing with your emotions in a very loving way so that they don't spill out and hurt people because they're open and they don't know it's coming. Yeah. That said, I also believe that if you're doing that conscious level of work and everybody's at their own place, sometimes your own healing needs you to share, even before you're perfect, before it's ready, because I give thanks that I was on stage before I was completely healed, because it helped me to heal. Because the other side of that equation is that everybody is responsible for themselves. Yeah. I'm not responsible for anybody that's out there. My intention is always good. My intention is to entertain you, to activate you, to help you heal. but I'm not you. And I absolutely believe everybody has within them the tools, the help they need to feel their best, to get the help they need if they need to. I mean, I went to a 2-year master's in spiritual psychology, so I learned a lot of that. I've seen these exercises done with, prisoners and people who have a lot at stake, and they're okay listening to other people's stories, right? So I feel like some of that is just we're kind of brainwashed to not tell our secrets, to be responsible for other people. And the other thing is, when people are afraid to tell stories because of family members will be hurt and this and that, again, I feel like it's a mechanism for the ego to protect itself, because part of the time they're talking about like an elderly parent who is still abusive to them, that lives across the country, that will never hear their story. And what I say, the other part of it is, if they're still in relationship with them, is, what if, because you share your side, because I do not teach to vilify anybody. I teach to tell the facts, but not to vilify. What if by you sharing your story, your perspective, that family member gets to actually hear how you really felt, instead of whatever surface level relationship you have. And then you give them the option to step up or not. And then you can see, the value of that relationship.
That's so great. Because in transformation, like that's the work we do, right? Like share, because then you're giving somebody a chance to maybe correct, maybe they don't even know.
Exactly. Maybe they don't even know, or maybe they're defensive, and then it just shows you that they're never going to be that person you need them to be. And my question is, how old do you have to be before you own your story? Like, it might sound harsh, but it's like, everybody over 40 should be able to tell their story, and I say this because there's a lot of people who still are like, but this parent, or but this spouse. Now, if there's going to be legal ramifications, absolutely don't share your story. And if you're going to hurt someone intentionally because of it, why would you share it? I'm not about like therapy, like just share all the little nitty gritty. Everything I teach really is about what's the message underneath. There's a through line. You're not just sharing, not in the venues I give people. You're not sharing just to be in a victim stance, because that doesn't empower anybody.
Yeah. So great, which is why that's the point why you want, I mean, in my perspective, you want the kind of training that you provide, because the story, for most of us, we are the face of our business, right? Like
Exactly. And that's what I teach. People are the face of their business, whether it's entrepreneurs or performers, like that want to step up. And then I'm teaching them the business that goes along with that. Our whatever it is, the work we're doing is based on who we are. So we want that to be infused, and it's social media and all of that. You got to put yourself out there with your story. Yes. And so I would, the first thing I would say to people who are afraid of hurting their audience and this and that, first of all, everyone, we are always judged. I would rather be judged for being too big than being too small, because I lived a lot of my life too small. I'd rather, if someone is judging me because they think I've told too much, because I mean, I've been doing this so long, I've gone through everything. I've had people say, why should you forgive your mother? Because I have a piece where I said I have to forgive my mother in my show because of the way she modeled for me how it's okay to be mistreated by someone who loves you. And there was someone in the audience who was like, why would you have to? That was the energy I felt. But you could see on her face years of anger and victimhood and right and wrong. And I just said calmly, because everything I put out there is well thought out. I told her what I told you because of that. So like, people are always going to judge you. So someone might say, oh, that's too much. But why should another adult, anybody, be able to tell you what's too much for you? So much of it is about self-awareness. I guess maybe I'm a bit of a permission giver for people. But that said, if you have a relationship with someone, you don't have to share everything. Like, there are certain things I don't share about members of my family. But I'm very careful to see if that request is something that is attuned with me and it aligns, and that's okay. Otherwise, I would share it.
Yeah. So great. So great. I love it. So can we touch a little bit on, because your story is powerful, and we don't necessarily want to get in there. What I want to get into is like, just as we are coming to the end, is that piece about forgiveness. Let's go back to the healing. Why, like, the component of telling a story as a way to heal, and the whole aspect of forgiveness.
Yeah, that's great. Well, for me, my healing really started in my lonely apartment in Beverly Hills, probably at 3 a.m, a couple of years after my mom died, and just writing my story down in my journal. Because up until then, or maybe it was a year later, up until then, I was in my head vacillating between I hate my father, I love my father, I hate my father, I love my father, I wish I was in the past. Oh, I just have to forgive because I have to go on. I can't remember. Like, it was all in my head. And what it was doing was sucking every bit of life force and joy out of me. And so the healing started for me writing it down during these sleepless nights, and then waking up the next morning, finally, after getting sleep, and being like, who wrote this? And I wrote 100 poems in 30 days, and they were dark, and they were rebellious, and they were sexual, and they were so intense. I was literally like, who wrote this? Because I identified as I'm a nice person, this and that. And one of those poems is what I was guided to expand into a scene, a 3-person scene, and put it up in acting class, a top acting class in LA, just as an exercise about being real and being seen, not knowing I'd get a standing ovation, people who wanted to work with me, a producer, like a director, and things like that. That's why it kind of went faster after that. But then I took years off because I wasn't healed after that first production. So that started. And then the thing about jumping into the characters of your life, I just feel so blessed, is that as a good actor, you can't play yourself as a villain, because people don't play themselves as villains. So when I wrote the character of my father and jumped into that role, I had to look at him as a full person, as a person who had dreams that were thwarted, didn't have tools, who had some mental illness. And it kind of gave me an insight into who he was and gave me more compassion. And so that was one thing that started opening my heart. Then when I learned about forgiveness and really got that forgiveness is for me, not for him or anyone else, that I had this huge insight that any part of me that hated him, especially because he's my father, hated a part of myself. And when I realized that, it was like, oh, what am I doing to myself? Why am I letting a thought about him wreck my day? He's not doing anything to me in that moment. So that's where the forgiveness stuff came forward. And a big breakthrough I had was when I realized that we were one. I did a forgiveness ceremony on top of a mountain in LA, threw a hat of his over the mountainside. I actually act that out in my show. And I came back with this loving and this expansiveness and a space where I could start having joy again after that. So, and then when I started doing the show with that forgiveness piece in it, then I would have people who were interested in, like, how did you forgive? And so I wrote my book on forgiveness. Like, I went painstakingly through my life, and I'm like, what happened? And it was a lot about it. It was about what I missed. Why I was depressed for so long was that I hadn't really handled my anger for a long time. I just suppressed it, and I had to find a healthy way to let go of my anger so that I could stop lashing in at myself. That's how I did it, instead of lashing out. Once I did that, there was a spaciousness to start creating the life I wanted to. And so the first step was actually embracing that I was a victim, not going to the spiritual bypass. Like, yes, he's horrible, I hate him, everything like that. I had to embrace that. So that I can move past it and then give up my need to be right, which is part 2 of my forgiveness process.
This is so good. What you just went through, and thank you for going there with me, because I believe that's where we are in our global experience, right? Like, going into the stories, not just of our life, this lifetime, but generational secrets coming forward, and having to work through the forgiveness. And this was perfect. And learning how to tell the story in a way that provides a space for healing for everybody else right now, especially.
Right. Like you, and then the way you share it does it for the audience. And that's why people remember you. I think that's why our businesses are so important. Like, when we're aligned and on purpose in our business, and then we share these really powerful, vulnerable things about ourselves, the person in the audience has hope, and they know they're not alone.
Yeah. Oh, so great, Brenda. Oh my gosh,
what a great conversation.
So good, and it's so potent and so powerful. So as we wrap up, I know you have a gift for our audience. I love
do, and it's a new one I was inspired to create. It's called it's an ebook. It's the 20 top speaking tips for entrepreneurs, because a lot of entrepreneurs don't have this acting training or
Right.
know how to really bring their presence to speaking. And of course, you can use it for stage or virtual, since everything's virtual nowadays too.
So great, such a great tip, especially if somebody is just starting out and they don't even have awareness that there is something they need to learn about how they're showing up, so, and how they're speaking. So great. So you guys, make sure you claim the gift. 20, say it again, it's the
20 top speaking tips for entrepreneurs.
Thank you. Perfect. Make sure you claim it. The button right below this video. Oh, such an amazing conversation. Get into Brenda's world. Learn about how to present your story in a way that first of all shows who you are, what it is you came here to bring, and allows other people to see themselves in the story, because then that's the connection piece, right? Oh,
beautiful. So yes, beautiful. All that oneness. We need that now.
Yeah. As we part our ways, I have one last question.
Okay.
What is your vision for the world we are creating?
Well, I was saying it briefly before we came together. I feel like, I'm creating something called the Soul Story Lounge, a collection of soul storytellers who can go around the world, virtually and in person eventually, and share from their heart, whatever your messages are. Mine's on forgiveness, but on self-love, all these different things. And so in this world, in my vision, we all connect authentically like this, so that the circumstances that are different don't matter. We're connecting from our heart. We're bringing our head in, but our soul is inspired and we're present with everybody, really present.
Wow, so good. Yum. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being in the salon again with your with your beautiful perspective. It's so needed right now. Thank you for being here, part of our conversation, and we'll see you at the next conversation. Bye.